Hello, it's Thursday. Why didn't the skeleton go to the ball? Because he had nobody to go with.
Hello, it's Thursday, and today we are going to be making the rest of our skeleton. Now, a couple of months ago, we made the skull, and I kind of teased the thought that maybe I would make him the rest of the body, and, well, I did. And I'm honestly pretty proud at some of the pieces and how they turned out. So I look forward to running you through them all today. Now, if you haven't made the skull, check the cards in the description down below. There will be a link to that. I encourage you to make that first. All right, let's talk about tools and materials. So to make your skeleton body today, you're going to need 8 ply 100% acrylic yarn in 2 colors. So you're going to need a light color for the bones and a dark color for the background. Now, you can see on my original Mr. Bones here that I have used white and black for that. However, because black doesn't show up very nicely on camera, I've decided to use blues today. You're also going to need a 3.5mm hook, a pair of scissors, some stitch markers, and your pins and needles, as well as a weight. So the real trick to him being as posable as he is we put a weight in his butt. So what I'm using here is a piece of landscaping quartz that I've nicked out of my sister's driveway. I don't know if she knows that I did that, but there we are. So any rock will do, or you can use glass beads for the purpose, or just anything that's not going to stain or damage your yarn is perfectly fine for a weight. Sometimes I use old washers and that sort of thing as well. And finally, the last thing we need to have before we get started is you need to have made a skull in the colors you're using today, following the skull tutorial that I published a couple of weeks ago. Now there is a link to that in the description, as well as in the cards at the top of the video if you need it. Make sure that you make the first 4 rows of your skull in your dark color instead of just in your outside color like that pattern recommends. And that'll just work to give the inside of your mouth a little bit of contrast. And last of all, you are going to need a little bit of stuffing, but that's it. So one final note before we get started today, note that I haven't used any extra wire or pipe cleaners to help me pose my skeleton, but you absolutely can if you want to. Just when you start to make your arms and legs, you would work over the top of whatever support you want to put in. Even the spine and the skull for this one here, I've just used a little bit of stitch locking to hold the head up. Gives him a little bit of a cute wobble. But yeah, there's no fancy tricks applied there. It's literally just sewn on otherwise. So a written version of today's pattern will be sent out to my patrons and will also be available in my Etsy. I will leave links to both in the description down below for anybody who is interested. Okay, so the first piece we are going to be making today is this main body chunk nugget. So basically what we do is we start in our dark color at the base of it here, and then we work up and start working some color changes in our lighter color to build up the sternum. Finish off this piece at the top, and then we work these rib cage strands around the outside of the piece. This whole pattern is really very fiddly, but we're going to take most of it one step at a time. So we're going to start by grabbing our dark color. And for me, that is this dark blue, because I'm really invested in you guys being able to see what I'm doing on camera. So now we're going to work up the first 13 rows of the body, because it's all just pretty standard stuff. So just like that, so we have the bottom part of the torso made now. So here we are at the end of row 13. So what we're going to be doing next is some color changes to build up the little sternum at the front that we will be anchoring the ribs to in the next step. So what this calls for is for the first 3 stitches of row 14 to be made in our lighter color. So color changes in this pattern are all worked that you change color in the stitch before you need the new color to be active, which means as the first stitch of the next row is in our lighter color, we have to change to that color in the last stitch of our previous row. So I'm just frogging that final stitch in that row of 30, and we're going to use it to change our color. So I start by inserting my hook, yarning over and pulling up a loop, just like with a standard single crochet, leaves me with 2 loops on my hook. I hold that color out of the way, grab a strand of my new color and pinch it at the base of the stitch, then yarn over with it and pull through both loops. I then give the tails a gentle tug to settle that stitch down into place. So what you should see there is a finished single crochet in my dark blue with my light blue on my hook ready to go. So the next row starts with 3 back loop only single crochet. So just in case you aren't aware, though if you're not aware of where the loops are, this pattern might be a little tricky for you. Crochet is usually done by default through both loops on top, but when we're working through the back loop only, it means we are only inserting our hook through the loop on the wrong side of the piece, the inside side of the piece, the far side of the piece, etc. So not the side facing us. So we are going to work the first 2 single crochet in those back loops. So then I can see on the pattern that after our 3rd stitch in our light color, we're meant to be working in our dark color again. So in that 3rd stitch, I'm going to color change back to my dark color, just pulling it across the work from where it's still attached, pinching it at the base again, and yarning over it and pulling through with it. So we then are working 27 single crochet around through both loops. So we work these next few rows, leaving both colors still attached and basically just pulling them across the work when we need them again. So this is the 27th stitch here, which gets us back around to our starting point, but I can see we're doing the exact same thing in the next 2 rows. So I'm going to change back to my lighter color, all ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and work up the next 5 rows now because they are using the exact same technique as that row I just showed you. So you'll note there that I'm making absolutely no effort to hide the fact that the sternum slopes off to one side. You will not even notice that once it's assembled, so don't stress about it now, even though looking at it, I know it drives me a little nutty as well. So in the final row of building up this sternum, we are actually going to go back to working through both loops for both colors. So we start with 4 single crochet in our pale color, then swap to our dark color, and we're going to work 6 single crochet, changing back to our pale color in the last stitch. So the reason why we work those last 6 stitches is now if you flatten it out with your sternum, or at least the top of your sternum in the middle of your piece, your active loop should be on one side. And we are done with our dark blue for this piece now, so you can trim and tie that off. So I actually kind of like my magnetic scissors, and someone was able to come to my rescue and tell me why they are magnetized now. Apparently they must have come into contact with a magnet. So yeah, that's good to know. I just cut off the wrong color, didn't I? Anyway, I'm gonna fix this, give me 1 second. Okay, so trimming off the right color this time, your dark color. Teach me to prattle on about magnetism. I'm gonna tie it in a little knot so it doesn't go anywhere. Tuck that down inside. So you're actually done with your dark color for this project. So in our lighter color, we are going to chain 1, and we want to work 6 single crochet through both layers of our piece back towards the middle. So I've chained 1 and I've turned my work so that the sternum is now facing away from me. And then I'm going to insert my hook through the next available stitch and the single crochet we just worked, like so. Then yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and complete the single crochet. So there is my first one. I'm going to do the same thing in the next 5 pairs of stitches through both layers. Like so. And at this point we are going to stop and stuff our piece and add our weight in. So I'm going to start just by putting a little bit of stuffing in the base. Then I'm going to plonk my rock in, making sure it's sitting nice and sturdily in that main bottom cup. And even just like that, with it just sitting at the bottom, it should be able to give you a little bit of balance so that this is the heavy end and it's staying down. And then I'm just going to fairly roughly pack the rest of this piece as full as I can. Now, this is the only stuffing you're going to be doing for this piece. I mean, you would have stuffed your skull as well, but this is the only stuffing you need for the skeleton. And with that done, I might have to take some of that stuffing out, actually. I got a little enthusiastic. And with that done, we are going to continue on and make up our ribs. Okay, so next up we are going to be making our ribs. So these ribs are made using extended triple crochets, and I specifically looked up what they were called so that I could use the right names for this, but I'm going to say them and you're going to think I'm making things up again. So be warned, I tried to do my research here, but feel free to correct me in the comments if you know that I've still gotten it wrong. But before we get there, turn your piece over and look at this sternum, and what you should be able to see is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of front loops running along the front of it. So each one of these rows of front loops is going to have a rib connected on either side of it. So you should think of them as, this top one as row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and row 5. Okay, that's going to help you as we start building up these ribs. So this first rib starts with chain 4, like so. I'm then going to turn my work over. I'm going to identify the left hand side front loop on that first row. So that row 1 of front loops, identify the one on the left. And into that front loop, we are going to do a sextuple treble crochet. Yep, that's what I said. What that means is you're going to yarn over your hook 7 times, like so. And I find it really helpful to hold it in place with my finger so that it doesn't unravel. Insert your hook through that front loop we identified in that first row, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through the first 2, yarn over and pull through the next 2. Just keep doing that, 2 loops at a time, until you run out of loops. And you should have to do it 8 times, like so. Now you might want to try it on for size now. So we are going to like pull them down and around the shoulder like so. So that is our first rib, but it can sit up here for now. It's a little easier to build it and then drape them around where they're supposed to be. So there is our first rib. We are then going to chain 1 to leave ourselves a little bit of space. And I'm sorry, I have to look at my notes for this. We are now going to do, and we're now going to work 4 more ribs. And for them, we will be using non-upple trebles. And what that means is we're going to yarn over our hook 10 times. So this time I'm working into the second row of front loops. And then just yarning over and working through 2 loops at a time until we get back to the start. And again, you should be doing this 11 times for this stitch. If you find these too unmanageable, I did find that these gave me the nicest appearance, but you can also get away with chaining. So to replace the non-upple treble crochet, I would chain to the right length, slip stitch into the sternum, turn, and then slip stitch back up to the top of the rib. So just know that like if these stitches are proving unmanageable for you, that is the alternate way to do this. And there is our second rib done. So the next 3 ribs are exactly the same as this one here. I've already chained 1 as my spacer, and I'm going to work 3 more ribs, 1 in each row of front loops, each with a non-upple treble crochet in them. That's 1, chain 1. So that's our 4th rib, and we have 1 more to work. Like so. So you'll see there that we have 5 ribs in total, 4 with 10 yarn over stitches and 1 with a 7 yarn over stitch. I'm then going to chain 1 and turn. So we have 1 end anchored in the body, and then we have this sort of row that we've created through making those stitches, and that is where we're going to put 13 slip stitches along. So that is 1 in the top of each of our treble crochets, and then 1 in each of the gaps. Which will get you up to 9 slip stitches, and then you have your 4 chains from the start, and we're going to slip stitch into each of those to get us up to the 13 that we're looking for. And I am slip stitching into those stitches, not around them. That stitch count doesn't particularly matter, it's just about working our yarn from the end of the rib cage back up to where the neck will be. So there we have 1 sort of flappy wing of our rib cage, 1 flappy wing of our rib cage, and we're going to just pull it around and put it into position. So if you grab the far corner, which is the one attached to that longest rib, you're going to grab it and pull it down to the center back. So that's the opposite side of the sternum. I'm just going to grab a pin, chuck that in, and then you just sort of position your ribs so that they all fall down and around that side. This one at the top is going to be the tightest fit, but the rest of them should sort of drape kind of nicely. And chuck a couple of extra pins in just to hold that spine straight. We do have a spinal column that we put over the top to hide any real mess, but this is just to pull those ribs into place. So there is the first side of our rib cage. Of course, the pain is not yet done. We are now going to work 4 single crochet through both layers to hold the next chunk of our body together. So these 4 stitches should line up with the 4 light blue stitches on the other side. So insert your hook through 1 dark stitch and 1 light stitch on the other side. And work a single crochet. Do that 3 more times. Like so. So now we should just have a very small opening left on one side, and we are going to stop and make the other side of our rib cage. And we work them exactly the same way as we did on the first side. So you start by chaining 4 and working a sextuple treble crochet, which means yarning over 7 times. And this time we'll be working in the front loops on the other side of each of those rows. Then chaining 1, then working a non-upple treble crochet through row 2, which means that we are yarning over 10 times. Chain 1, another non-upple treble crochet through row 3, which means yarning over 10 times. Again, apologies if this week's video is a little bit repetitive. I just feel like if I'm forcing you to do nightmare stitches, you should at least get to watch me struggle with them as well. Chain 1. Then we've got another one where we're yarning over 10 times. Chain 1, and then a final non-upple treble crochet. Chain 1 and turn. We're once again going to put 13 slip stitches back up towards the neck. Again, working in the tops of each of our triple crochets and into the gaps between them. And then just 1 into each of the original chain 4s that we did at the start of those ribs. Like so. We are then going to work 5 single crochet through both layers to get to the end of the body and seal it completely shut. And finish off. I gotta tell you guys, if you made it through this piece, the rest of this pattern is going to be a breeze for you. Once again, we're going to grab the far corner of that rib, stretch it down and around the side, and stretch it as close to the middle at the back as we can. Pin in place along that edge. Note that there's about a 1 centimeter gap all the way down. We will fill that with a spinal column in a minute. And once again, just nicely space out our ribs. Voila! Okay, I'm going to pop that to one side. So next up, we're going to make the spinal column, which is the piece that attaches the head to the body and runs the whole way down the back. So it runs all the way through the rib cage as well as into the pelvis later. So we're going to just make this long worm now. So the spine never goes wider than 6 single crochet around, though you will note that we are alternating between rounds of back loops only and regular single crochet. That is what gives us that is what helps create the illusion that we have different vertebrae making up our spine. Now the spine is one piece. I would suggest if you're going to do it, you put a pipe cleaner or a piece of wire down the middle of it. None of the other limbs necessarily require it, but if you're not comfortable with stitch locking techniques, you might want to add a little bit of extra support to this piece. And finish off. Now you should have 3 stitches remaining in your round, and I'm just going to pull this tail through the front loops of those 3. And pull it tight to close into a little point. So that pointy end will be our tailbone, and sort of the blunt end where we started will be our neck. Just tuck that end away inside your spine. Like so. Okay, so next up we are going to make his pelvis. Oh, his legs are a little floppy, hold on. Next up we're going to make the 2 pieces that form his pelvis. So we make a left piece and a right piece. Also left piece and a right piece, and they're basically shaped like elephant ears. So once again, grabbing your bony color, you're going to start with a magic ring of 6. Like so. We're then going to work 6 repeats of an increase to get up to 12 stitches around. So in row 3, we are going to start with an increase, then a single crochet, and then 2 repeats of 2 increases and 2 single crochets. So there is my first increase, second increase, and then 2 single crochet, and then 2 increases, and then 2 single crochet. Then finish off the round with an increase and a single crochet. So you should be up to 18 stitches around at this point. And you should note that your piece isn't round. We're building up an almost triangular kind of shape. That's because this is going to be the larger side of the pelvis. Now, at this stage, there is a difference between your left pelvis and your right pelvis. So we're going to do the left one first. So the left one, you put 18 single crochet around. Like so. We're then going to chain 5, then turn, and starting in the second chain from our hook, work 3 single crochet back down that chain. So there should be 1 chain left, and we're going to skip that one, and instead we're going to slip stitch into the next available stitch on our main piece. That's creating kind of like this little front spur. And now we just need to create the lower lobe of our pelvis. So to do that, we are going to work 4 single crochet, just working around the stitches like we would normally. That's 4. Going to chain 1 and turn, and then working back into those 4 stitches we've just done, you're going to work a single crochet, a decrease, and then a single crochet, chain 1 and turn, and you're going to work a single crochet 3 together. And finish off. So I know this is a very strange looking piece, but that is our left pelvis, and now we need to make our right pelvis. So we work our right pelvis exactly the same as the left up to the end of row 3. So there we are, back to our kind of wonky little triangle. So then to make our right one, we are going to work 15 single crochet around. So just like that. We're going to leave the rest of the stitches unworked, and instead we're going to turn and work back into the stitches we've just done. And we're going to start by chaining 5 and creating that little finger that goes at the front of the pelvis, little front wing bit. So chain 5, turn and start from the second chain from your hook, single crochet 3, skip the final chain, and then slip stitch into the next stitch around on the main piece. And then we're going to create that lower lobe again. So work 4 single crochet along. Chain 1 and turn, work a single crochet, a decrease, and then a single crochet. Chain 1 and turn, and work a single crochet 3 together, and finish off. So there is your right pelvis. So these pieces are going to look strange for now, but just pop them to one side and I will show you how to pin them on so that they make a little bit more sense after we finish making the limbs. Okay, so you might find the next piece a little bit humorous. I am, of course, talking about the arms. I love the articulation. Just like, wah! Sorry, enough of that. I'll stop playing with him. So the arms start at the shoulder joint, then we basically work down towards the fingertips. So again, in our pale color, we are going to work a magic ring of 6, like so, and then work up the next 12 rows to form the top part of the arm. So there we are, we have our top part of our arm. It should have kind of a knobble on each end. And I'm not stuffing this piece at all, but there is room in there for some pipe cleaner or something like that if you did want to add a little bit of extra structure to yours. So from here on out is where this piece becomes kind of painful. You're welcome. So pinch the top of it so that your active stitch is on one side, and you should see that we have 6 stitches around, which basically form 3 pairs. And what you're going to do is work 3 single crochet through both layers to seal off that top. Now this is how we are forming our elbow hinge. So that takes our round of 6 down to just 3 single crochet. Then we're going to chain 1 and turn, and this is where you're all going to actually start hating me, I think. So now when we look down at this, we can see 3 stitches, right? But we can also see 6 loops. So we have 3 loops on one side and 3 loops on the other. And what we're going to do is work 2 single crochet in the front loops only, like so. I'm going to skip the next loop and turn my work, and then skip the first loop on that side too, and then work 2 single crochet in the back loops of the stitches we literally used the front loops for just then. So what we have left there is 2 of the stitches. We have created this new round of 4. And then with that 3rd stitch on the end, both loops are free and it's just sort of sticking out to one side. So this little 4 single crochet round off to one side is our new round. And we are going to work 8 rows of 4 single crochet to build up the first arm bone. Now, just because I'm going to find that particularly difficult to film, so forgive me if I just do that off camera. Just like so. Then we're going to work a quadruple treble crochet back into this elbow joint. And so what that means is we are going to yarn over 5 times. So not as bad as when we were doing the ribs, but still a lot. And then just come down here and insert your hook through both loops of that stitch we left free on the elbow. And then same rules apply. So yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and just keep doing that until you get back to the start. And you should have to do that 6 times. So that creates that second thinner bone for your arm, which I really like the look of, honestly, which also adds a 5th stitch to our round. So we've got the 4 that we were working around into, and then we've got this 5th one that we've just created. So you're going to work 2 rounds of 5 single crochet around those stitches to create our wrist. Like so. With the wrist made, the next thing we're going to make is our thumb. So we do that by chaining 6, like so. We're then going to turn, and starting in the 2nd chain from our hook, you're going to put 5 slip stitches down back towards the base. Okay, our bony friend is ready to hitchhike now. So there is his thumb. We're then going to flatten our round, which has 5 stitches in it, and we're going to work 2 stitches through both layers. So that means I'm going to insert my hook through the next stitch available in the round and the last single crochet that we did. There is our first one. Then the next single crochet along on each side. There is our second one. And then in that final stitch, you'll be able to see the post right on the edge of it. You're just going to insert your hook around that post and work your 3rd stitch. So there is our palm. And now we are going to start working up his fingers. So we are over here. So the way we do that is we work, ignore the fine bones first. We're going to work 1 row of phalanges along here, and then we'll go along and add his fingertips in a 2nd row. So we start by chaining 4 and turning. So this is what it currently looks like. And work a triple crochet, which is just yarning over twice, into that 1st stitch. So 1, 2, 3. Then chain 1. We're going to work a triple crochet into the next stitch. 1, 2, 3. Chain 1. And then work a triple crochet into that last stitch, which should be the base of the thumb. So there's the mid part of the hand worked up. So next up, we're going to be making his fingertips. So we start by chaining 4 again. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we turn our whole piece. And we also turn so that we're working down the chains we just did. We're going to start in the second chain from our hook and put 3 slip stitches down. So there's our first fingertip. We're then going to slip stitch into the next available pair of loops, which should fall pretty close to directly underneath where we were chaining, and then slip stitch into the gap between the triple crochets from the previous round. So that's where we chain gapped. And we're going to build the second finger. So we chain 4, turn, and then slip stitch into 3 of them. And again, so this one here, you'll be able to see a little bit clearer. We have the stem of the stitch that we worked, and we're going to start by slip stitching into the loops on the top of that stitch. And then slip stitch into the chain 1 gap between. So there is our second finger. They should look like they're on top of the stitches we did in the previous round. If they look kind of higgledy-piggledy, you've probably missed that first stitch where we're slip stitching into the base. So chaining 4, turn and slip stitch 3 times, like so. Slip stitch into the pair of loops, slip stitch into, it would be the gap, but it's actually just around the chains on that final end one. So that's our third finger, and then we need to make one more. Midgie, sorry. So chain 4, turn, slip stitch 3 times. And this time, because there isn't really a stitch for us to slip stitch into, we are just going to slip stitch back into that gap and finish off. Now, you might want to leave maybe 2 inches of tail here, because that's going to allow us to tuck this tail in around the stem of that stitch, just kind of like in and out, wrapping it around and around to hide it until we get back to the wrist, and then you can tuck it away down inside that column that we made one of the arm bones with. Now anything that's sitting higgledy-piggledy, a little bit of a tug should sort it out. So there is your first arm. Good news about these arms is that you make 2 exactly the same and then just flip it over, because the way these elbow joints work is that they can hinge in either direction. So make 2 of those and then pop them to one side. Now I've abruptly realized that I forgot to make the lower jaw, so we're going to cut back to the start. Alrighty, so now we're going to make his lower jaw. It's a piece that wasn't on the original skull. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. And so we're just going to whip that piece up really quickly now. So we do that in our bone color, and you start by chaining 7. Like so. We then turn and start in the second chain from our hook and work 6 single crochet along those chains. Chain 1 and turn, and work 2 more rows of 6 single crochet. Chaining 1 and turning between rows. So there is our final single crochet. We are not going to chain 1 and turn at the end of this row. Instead, we are just going to rotate our work, so we're looking at the short side, and we're going to work 3 single crochet down the ends of the rows. Then we're going to rotate it again, so we're looking at the underside of our starting chain, and we're going to work 6 single crochet across. Like so. We're going to rotate again, work 3 single crochet up the other side. Then we're going to chain 1 and turn, so we're working back into the 3 single crochet we just did. So we start with 2 single crochet, then a decrease, then we're going to form a couple of little teeth. So we do that by working a triple crochet, which meaning we yarn over our hook twice into the front loop of the stitch, like so. Then we fold that forward and work a slip stitch into the back loop of the same stitch. So it gives us this sort of knobbly little tooth, and we're going to do 3 more of those. So triple crochet in the front loop, slip stitch into the back loop, and so on. So we have 4 knobbly little teeth. We are then going to finish off our row with a decrease and then 2 single crochet and finish off. So there is his lower jaw. So the teeth obviously fall at the front of that jaw. Then we have the sides, and then this flat edge without the ridge around it is where the back of the jaw is. And we will be attaching that to his head like so. Bah, 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 black sheep. Pop that to one side for now. Alrighty, so now we're finished with the armies. There's something I need to tell you. It's time to make the leggies. And there is a difference between his right leg and his left leg, but that doesn't really kick in until we reach the feet. We basically start where they meet the hip and begin working down. So these legs are worked up very similar to how we do the arms. So we start by working up that main leg bone, which is mostly just a tube that's 6 single crochet around. And then we widen out the top of it slightly by working 2 repeats of 2 single crochet and then an increase. Work a row of 8 single crochet around. And then, just like we did with the arm to form the elbow, we're going to squish this opening flat, and we're going to work 4 single crochet through both layers to close off that part of the leg. So just like that, you've got 4 across what's going to become the knee. On the arm, we only had 3 across, but on this one here, we have 4. We are then going to chain 1 and turn. So just like we used to form the forearm, we're now going to be forming the calf. So in order to do that, we need to form our new round of 4 single crochet around using these loops that are on top of the stitch. So you should be able to see 8 loops in total. So you should have 4 along one side and 4 along the other. So we're going to start by working 2 single crochet in the front loops only. 1 and 2, and turning our work and work 2 single crochet in the back loops of the front loops we just worked into. So 1 and 2. So what you should be able to see there is 4 single crochet here to form a round and 2 stitches left free on this knee. So that 4 single crochet is our new round. And we're going to work 10 rows of 4 single crochet around. Now, once again, I find this too hard to do leaning over, so I will be doing that off camera. Just like that. Forgive me for that, I'm sorry about it. But you'll see that we've just extended that up into a little column, but we still have those 2 stitches free on the knee. We're then going to work 1 single crochet and an increase. And then we're going to not work the other stitches in that round this time around. Instead, what we're going to do is work a septuple triple crochet. So that means we are yarning over 8 times. And where we have those 2 stitches free on the knee, we're going to insert our hook through the outer stitch. Through both loops, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then work the rest of that stitch just by yarning over and pulling through 2 loops at a time until you've done it 9 times in total, which should leave you at the top. Anywhere we use these extended triple crochets, I may have already said this, but we can use chain exploits instead. Just let me know in the comments if you need more help with it than that, and I will do my best to help fill you in on the trick. So there we have the secondary leg bone. We are then going to work 6 single crochet around. So that is 5 around our original column, and the 6th is that long octuple treble crochet stitch that we did. So just like that. So that brings us to our ankle. So there is a difference between the right leg and the left leg, and we're going to make our right leg first. Now they are exactly the same up till this point. So to make your right leg, the next thing we're going to do is work 3 single crochet and then 3 increases. Like so. So those increases are going to help us form the top of our foot. We are then going to be working a couple of short rows just to curve off the back of the heel. So we do that by working 5 single crochet. Then chain 1 and turn, and we're going to work back into those stitches we've just done. And we're going to actually be working 6 single crochet in this row. So that is 1 stitch in each of the 5 from the previous row, and then a 6th stitch into a stitch from the prior row. So we have 6 stitches around, chain 1 and turn. So the rest of these short rows will fall completely within the bounds of those 6 stitches. So the next row is 2 single crochet, a decrease, and then 2 single crochet, then chain 1 and turn. You're going to work a decrease, 1 single crochet, and then a decrease, chain 1 and turn, and then you're going to single crochet 3 together, just like so. So you'll see you should have this little cup, and that is the heel that is going to form the back of our foot. Now, without turning, so we're not chaining 1 and turning at the end of that, we are going to work 4 single crochet up the side of that little foot cup. Like so. That should bring us to the top of our foot, and we are going to work 4 front post single crochet along the top. I don't recall if we have done front post single crochet anywhere else in the rest of this pattern, but just in case we haven't, front post is when you're working around the post of the stitch and you insert your hook around it from the front of the work back to the front of the work. So we're working these here to help pull our foot up and into position. So that's 4 along the top of the foot. We're then going to work 3 single crochet down the sides of those short rows, and then 1 single crochet into the single crochet 3 together we did in the previous row. So your new round should have 12 stitches in it in total. In the next round, we're going to work 2 repeats of 2 single crochet and 2 decreases. So there is our first repeat, and we're going to do it again. That should get us down to 8 stitches around, and we're going to work a little short row just to move our starting point now. So that's work 3 single crochet, like so. So you'll see there that our active loop is now on the side of the foot. We are going to turn our work and squish it flat so that we end up with 4 pairs of stitches. And once again, work 4 single crochet through pairs of loops to fasten the 2 sides together. So there we go. You should end up with just 1 little row of 4 stitches across. So from here on out, we are going to be forming his feet bones and his toes. I'm sorry, if that engine noise is coming through over here, I can't do anything about it. So we're going to start by chaining 3. And then we're going to chain 1, which is our little spacer. And we're going to turn our work. So that now we're going to be working into those 4 stitches. So in the first one, we're going to put a triple crochet. That's when we yarn over twice, for anyone who needs a reminder. And then chain 1 and work a triple crochet into the next one across. Then chain 1, work a triple crochet into the next one. Chain 1 and work a triple crochet into the last stitch. So there are his foot bones, and now we just need to work up his little toes. So we're going to chain 3, then turn to work down those chains, and starting in the second chain from our hook, we are going to put 2 slip stitches down them. We are then going to put a slip stitch into the stitch that's at the base, and slip stitch into the gap between those foot bones. So there is our first toe, and we're going to repeat that 4 more times across. So chain 3 times, turn and work 2 slip stitches down, slip stitch into the next foot bone stitch, and then slip stitch into the gap between them, to number 2, and so on and so forth. So the only difference is with this last toe, once we've formed the toe itself, we are just going to slip stitch back into that same gap to lock it into place. Then finish off leaving a little bit of a tail so that we can weave that back along the edge of the foot until we can tuck it away inside the heel. So there is our right leg. Now you may wonder, looking at these toes, why we draw the distinction between a right leg and a left leg, and the answer I can give is that it all comes down to this bone here. It is meant to be on the inside, I think. In either case, whether it's meant to be on the inside or the outside, we do need it to mirror. And with the leg, we can't just flip it over, because then your foot would be on upside down and nobody likes a backwards foot. So we're just going to hop this little guy over there and work up another leg exactly the same until you reach the heel again. Okay, so we are making the left leg now. So to form the left ankle, we start with 3 increases. And then work 3 single crochet. So that's basically a mirror image of the same row that we did on the right leg. We are then going to work just 1 single crochet and turn. So now we're going to be working up that little foot cup that forms the heel again. So in this row, we work 6 single crochet across. Chain 1 and turn, and it should look pretty familiar from here. So 2 single crochet and a decrease, and then 2 single crochet, chain 1 and turn, decrease, a single crochet and a decrease, chain 1 and turn, and then we are going to single crochet 3 stitches together. So the final row that we need to do here is 3 single crochet up the edges of those short rows. That's because we're working the mirror image of the previous foot, which brings us to the top of the foot, even if the leg is bending around a little oddly. And we're going to work 4 front post single crochet along the top. And then 4 single crochet down the other side of the edges of the short rows. And 1 into the single crochet 3 together that we did at the end of the last row. So there is our round of 12 stitches. So the instructions are on the screen for you now, but what we're going to do from here is work to close off the heel. Then form the bones of the foot. And finally, adding the toes. This little piggy went to market. This little piggy stayed home. This little piggy had roast beef. And this little piggy had none. This little piggy went wee 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 all the way home. So untwist your knee if yours is twisted like mine is. And there is our other leg. But you should have 2 of them now. And I do believe it does go that way. Now, honestly, if you've made it this far in the video, you probably don't need my help assembling, but we're gonna do it anyway. So there is our little autopsy. So these are all of the pieces you should have before we start assembling. So you should have your skull, your lower jaw, your torso and rib cage, a spinal cord, 2 arms, a right leg and a left leg, and 2 sort of pelvic pieces. And where we're going to start is with the skull. So clear all of the pieces except the skull and the lower jaw out of the way. So we have our skull and we have our lower jaw. So you should identify where the teeth are on your jaw and line them up with the teeth on your skull. And then we're going to just pin once in the corner of each of the sides. So there and there. So that does allow a little bit of hinging possibility for you. So there you can see that little bit of dark color that I warned you about when making the skull at the start of the video at play. You can choose to stitch this back edge down onto the skull as well, which will kind of lock it into a more sort of sturdy position, or you can choose to just sew down those 2 jaw points, which will allow it to hinge a little bit more. So we are going to sew that on now. And I'm going to sew mine down the whole way around. And I'm just going to tuck my ends in as I go. So there's that. Ha ha ha! Nice to meet you. Ah. Where's the wine? You're all probably way too young to get that reference. Don't even worry about it. All right, so we're going to pop that to one side. And we're going to grab our torso and our elephant ear pelvis. So Before, when we made the ribs, we've pinned them in place along the back. Now that you have your spinal cord, you can sort of measure and see if there's a little bit of a gap there, and if there is, try and stretch them a little bit more, which I'm just going to do. But don't have to be too precious about it. So that's where we'll sew those down. And now we're just going to pin our pelvis into place so that we can sew that all together in one hit. So you do have a left and a right pelvis, so identify the sort of the right side of each. The wrong side should have your tails still sticking out in them. So what we're going to do is find row 5 of the body, keeping in mind that we started at the stumpy end, not the shoulder end, and count sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Find sort of the center middle point, and you're going to pin that little finger wing doobit to that middle point on row 5. And that's on both of them. So your little fingery doobits should meet in the middle. We're then going to sort of stretch it slightly and wrap them around. There's a weight in the middle, so pinning can be a little bit tricky, so try not to get don't get frustrated or anything like that. Just maneuver your pin around until you can fit it in. And we're going to wrap this one around as well. Now the trick to this is at the back, you should have 2 to 3 stitches visible. So that's where the spine is going to fit in when we're all done here. So you can chuck a few more pins in there just to secure it in place. Now what's important to note about this piece is we want that top edge to curl down, and we want the bottom edge to curl as well. So our pelvis actually should curl out from the body and not be fastened completely down. So mine is not even at all at this point in time. So we are going to spend a little time pinning it so that it sits nice and evenly. So that's how that is going to end up positioned. And just to give you some idea of how the rest of the pieces will sit, so you can tell if you're on the right track or not, the leg is going to be sewn to the body through this lower wing of the pelvis. And the spinal cord is going to run down through the middle of those wings of the ribs, and it's going to sort of just make contact with either side of the pelvis, like that. So being careful not to sew these outer lips down, because we do want those to curl upwards. We're going to sew down the ribs and the 2 pelvic pieces on now. Right, so there is our little torso nugget all sewed together. So the next thing we are going to do is attach his spinal column. So flip the nugget over. So with those rows of front loops, that's actually going to help you really measure and position out this spinal column piece, because what it needs to be able to do is wrap around the curve of the back so that the tailbone doesn't protrude past the end of the nugget, but does sit within the wings of the pelvis, if that makes sense. So I'm going to pin that there. And when I sew that on, I am going to just use some stitches to pull the wings of the pelvis together to touch the spinal column. Position it up around the curve of the back. So you see it arches inwards like that. And we will be sewing it to where we've done those collarbones across the top as well. So that's kind of the shape your spine is going to form. I'm just going to sew that on really quickly now. So just like that. So note that the neck is secured at the front and the back so that it sticks straight upwards, and the rest of it is curled the whole way down and around. So next up, we are going to do his limbs, spooky, scary skeleton limbs. So grabbing our arms. Now remember that your thumbs, when your palms are facing each other, always point upwards. And the same should be true of your skeleton. So with the palms facing each other, your thumbs should point upwards. And we are basically just going to pin the bulbous bit at the shoulder to the end of each of those little collarbones. Now we're going to sew these on in a very specific way to give maximum posing potential. So bear with me one second here. Now, just so that the hands don't flop around while I do this, I am just going to secure them to his chest with the elbows bent in the correct manner. That's just going to help encourage them to bend that way from now on as well. So it's going to stop them flailing about as he is wont to do. So I still have a very sharp needle attached here, but it's a curved needle. And for this next bit, a long straight needle is better, even if it's not the sharpest thing, right? So the best way to sew these arms on is through, as much as possible, through a single stitch that goes through the arm and then back out through the same point. And that allows you to have like a pivoting joint around that strand. So this is just a continuation from where we sewed the spine on. I simply threaded the yarn out through the shoulder and out through the arm as well. So that's all you've missed. I'm sorry I didn't do that on camera. I am then going to work a little stitch into the arm to lock that into place. And then I want to thread this yarn back through the shoulder, emerging through basically the closest point I can to the same exact spot, and into the body. Now, if you have a long enough needle, you can go all the way through to the other side into the other arm. I do not today, so I'm just going to do one at a time. Take out the danger pins. And I'm going to keep threading in as many steps as I need to get out to the other shoulder. There we go. So I'm threading from here all the way out to the other shoulder. So that arm is now attached in that one pivotal point. And I'm going to do the same thing here on the other side. So a little locking stitch. And then back into the body. And I'm going to thread out into the sternum. And we're going to put a couple of little locking stitches into there, just so that it can't just be pulled off. But now if I take my pins out, my arms should pivot. I mean, you don't want to wrap them around and around and around. For just basic posing though, that'll be fine. And they also shouldn't pull off super easily either, once we've secured it down properly. So just while I finish assembly, and I encourage you to do this as well, just secure your arms back down into position. It'll save you the hassle of juggling limbs. So next up, we are going to do his legs. So once again, you should have a right leg and a left leg. The thin bone goes on the inside of the leg. The thick bone goes on the outside of the leg. So kind of the opposite. And what you're going to do is find that the little flap on your pelvis and line the knobble of the hip joint up inside that little flap. He is just naturally forming the fetal position and I'm trying not to feel like a monster. So same thing on the other side. Oh, you're so dramatic. And you should make sure that he sits as well. Like you don't want his legs to stick out too far in either direction. There we go. So he's sitting where his knees will bend, where he forms the fetal position. So for now, because he's naturally trying to form that position, I'm going to pin his knees to his chest. Again, just to keep all the flapping limbs as much out of the way as possible. If yours really doesn't want to do that, don't force it to, but sorry, I have way too much fun with how poseable these things are. Just look. He thinks he's a frog. And we're going to do the same sort of stitching through the hip joint to attach both of the legs. Now this time there is a weight in the way, so I've gone back to using my curved needle. He's just doing some immaculate yoga at the moment. And a locking stitch using the pelvis this time to stop it unraveling. And take all of your pins out. Now I'm going to leave mine all bound up like that while we attach the head. Just seriously, what's not to love about just, oh my goodness, sorry, the poses, guys. So now we are just going to grab our head. And if you look underneath, the spine doesn't attach to the back of the skull. If you look at any kind of skeleton drawing, you'll note that the spine actually kind of attaches to, for the purposes of today, it's sort of the middle center of your skull. So like here, maybe one row behind where we've attached the back of the jaw. So like that's where you should pin your skull as well. Now, once again, don't be afraid if it looks a little goofy at first, because it is going to naturally fall a little bit forward, which will help you. But we're also going to do some stitch locking to pull it as upright as it's possible to do. So just start by sewing the spine to the back of the head, but don't trim off your yarn just yet. Right, so that is my head and spine sewn together. You'll note that he is extremely floppy right now, and that's the bit that we're going to fix right now. So if any of you made my beholder months and months ago, if not a year ago, we did some stitch locking to pull the little eye stalks around so that they face the correct way, and this is based on a similar principle. So what I'm going to do is thread my needle up inside to the back of the head. So that is just continuing on from where I sewed around the spine. And I'm going to put a little stitch in the back of the head here. And this is working under the same principle as like a suspension bridge. We want to form cables inside the head and spine to help support the weight of the head. So now I've done that little stitch, I'm going to thread my needle back into the head and down into about here on the spine. So wish me luck with this curved needle. There we go. So you can see my entire needle is starting here, coming out here. And the idea is that we're threading one long strand down inside the head. And now I'm going to pull that. You'll note that it's starting to pull the head up on its own. Yep, that's doing what I expect it to do. And so I'm going to pull it as taut as I can and put a little locking stitch into the spine. We're then going to thread up again. And so that's one strand down from the middle. I'm going to put one in from either side, leading to the same point in the spine. So you don't have to be like super precise about this. It's just about adding as many strands as you need to make sure that your head stops flopping around. Of course, if you were just hanging this, like in a window or something, you would put the strand at the top of the head, and it doesn't matter if the head would be floppy on its own because the gravity would take care of everything for you. So I've threaded that up inside the head. You can kind of like reverse suspension. So again, I'm just going to pull it a little bit and put a little locking stitch in. I could really use a third hand sometimes when I do this sort of thing. Oh, so there's the second one. Now I'm going to rotate around. I'm just going to thread this through to the other side and a little locking stitch. And now I've only got sort of just enough yarn left to do one more, and he definitely needs it. And so now we'll thread from this side down to, again, roughly the same spot in the spine. Oh, she's good. Look at that. First poke. And we pull it again. So I find that 3 is kind of enough. Again, I just want to say you can put in as many as you feel like you need to. Keep them all at the back of the head though. You don't want to support it so that it dangles forward. I mean, unless you do, just because it's already wanting to tip forward. And these strands are there to counteract that. So when he's facing the camera, his head is still flopping backwards. But when he is upright, he is holding his head upright. I will change the camera angle in a minute and show you what I mean. So I'm going to just take the rest of the pins out here. Oh, you are so dramatic, sir. All right, let's unbunch the feet. Unswing the arms. Take all these pins out so you know that I'm not pretending or faking or nothing. And there is your little skeleton. So there is our skeleton. Now, whether or not you're just one of those super Halloween-y people who want to spend hours making your own decorations, or you just wanted to spend an hour watching me torture myself making tiny fiddly little pieces, I hope you had fun. So I maybe had a little bit too much fun photographing him in different poses. You should know that I haven't used pins or pipe cleaners or wire in any of those, but I have propped him very carefully. So I don't want to like overstate the firmness of these joints. But he is holding himself together. We worked ourselves to the bone on this one. Next week, we do have another Halloween pattern coming up. So I hope to see you then. Okay, bye.
Hello, it's Thursday. Why was the mushroom on the plane? Because he was a fun guy.